Hi, and welcome to another edition of Studio 411. I'm your host, Larry Dasilva, and today we have quite a lively guest here, one that can almost out-talk me, so this ought to make for some real good conversation. And she's making faces at me now as we speak, but we won't show that. Melanie Young certainly knows how to face challenges with the grit, grace, and wit and reframe them to make things happen for the better. She is a motivational, okay, I put my teeth in, muse for anyone who feels stuck and wants to reignite their personal or professional brand. And she is a living example of turning stumbling blocks into stepping stones. Melanie Young, I'll have to take a deep breath here to get all the credits in, a certified health coach, author, radio host of not one but two shows, my idol, breast cancer survivor, and she has also written two books, as I tilt them over here, the Fearless Fabulous You, Lessons in Living Life, and Getting Things Off My Chest, a survivor's guide, staying fearless and fabulous in the face of breast cancer. And she's like a sister to me. I feel a kindredship with this lady, and my friend, I hope she feels the same. If not, she'll tell me after the show. Melanie Young. Hi, Melanie.
Hi, Larry. Hi, kindred spirit.
Yeah. No, really. Also, let me say that melanieyoung.com and also your publisher, Cedar Fort Press. So on both books. No, you have really had quite a last 10 to 15 years, to say the least. Tell us a little bit, tell the viewers a little bit about what you were doing with your life when your little sidetrack years happened.
Well, Larry, I could honestly say I lived a very delicious life. I still do. I had I love the word eponymous public relations culinary events agency called M Young Communications, and I created the James Spirit Awards, which, as you know, are the Oscars of the food and beverage industry, as well as many other programs that have enriched and provided many people the ability to enjoy good food and drink. And I traveled the world working with most major wine regions and chefs, and had a large staff, and everything was fabulous. And then on a wine trip to Italy in 2009, I found a lump in my breast.
Wow.
And I came back to the United States, and in August I was diagnosed with stage 2A breast cancer, which started me on another trip that I did not plan to take to a place I never wanted to go, and I hope I never go back to, called Cancerland.
There you go. Yeah, and obviously, as you say, you've come through it, but I'm sure again, uh, not having dealt with it myself. Again, I'm kind of an outsider looking in, but again, you and so many other people, both male and female, but in terms of the predominant with relation to breast cancer, females,
Yes.
you certainly have turned into a kind of a guiding light, in my opinion, for a lot of people out there, not only through your books, but through your, speaking and touring and stuff that you do. You kind of maybe educate people in ways that I don't even sometimes know if you fully appreciate what you've done for people.
Well, yes, Larry. So, that date in 2009 was my BC, before breast cancer. And let me explain a little bit about after breast cancer, because there are, as you know, 1 in 8 women are diagnosed, and there are many other cancer survivors out there, and they all look at their life BC, before cancer, and after cancer. It is just the way your life changes. After cancer, I had to do a lot of soul searching, and what I realized was that maybe my lifestyle wasn't 100% the best one for me and was not healthy. I was overweight. I was highly stressed. I mean, I am a woman in motion and AAA personality. So the first thing I had to do was reset my priorities and decide that the most important thing was not to be successful. I already was a success, but I needed to be successful in managing my health and to stay healthy, because I did not want to go back to Cancerland. The second thing was dealing with the whole setback emotionally. In addition to being diagnosed with breast cancer, I lost my beloved father who really was my backbone, my trusted advisor, and aside from my husband David, my best friend. And he really counseled me through almost 20 years of running my business and did all the stuff I never wanted to deal with, which suddenly I had to deal with while I was going through cancer treatment, chemotherapy. And then the third thing is I had to figure out at the age of 51, what did I want to do with the rest of my life? What really mattered, and how did I want to live it? And that started me on the journey toward defining what I really loved and wanted to continue doing, which was writing and communicating. But I didn't want to be behind the scenes putting words in other people's mouths as a PR professional. I wanted to be out there with my own voice. And I wanted my voice to impact people and help other people make a difference in their lives. And that's what set me on the road to writing, to hosting my radio shows, and going back to school to become certified as a health and wellness coach.
Speaking of the radio shows, Fearless Fabulous You.
Yes.
The Women for Women Network, W4WN, and also the Connected Table, which, correct me if I'm wrong, you host with your husband David.
Yes.
And that is the Connected Table live and live on W4CY. And again, feel free to throw out some websites there so that
well, W4WN.com is the Women for Women Network. Both, and W4CY.com is the Infotainment Network. Both shows are on iHeart.com and the iHeart app under shows and personalities and can be listened to anytime. The difference is Fearless Fabulous You, which is the name of my second book, Fearless Fabulous You, Lessons on Living Life on Your Terms. It is inspiring women around the world, women who inspire and helping inspire you, and experts on health and wellness. I really dig deep into asking questions like I did with my first book, getting things off my chest. Like, what is it you want to know about your health? And I've covered everything from back to hip to skin to diabetes to multiple sclerosis to going back to school to learning how to code. I think about what would a woman want to know to empower her and enhance her life and help her stay healthy. That's the show Fearless Fabulous You. Again, Mondays 4 p.m. on the Women for Women Network and then broadcast to iHeart.com. My show with David comes from my food and beverage roots. I own a company called The Connected Table. When I closed M. Young Communications, I decided to take my name off the door and redefine as The Connected Table with the goal of creating a radio show and hopefully a TV show, and also creating educational events to help connect people to the world of food, wine, spirits, and hospitality in a fresh new way. That's what that show is. We interview all the wonderful people who shaped the food and beverage world. And it's my 20-something years of being in the industry, everybody we know.
Now, you talked about a certain type of personality that you feel you have. What is it about you as a whole that you think makes what you're doing now such a success? I mean, besides the passion and obviously the experience, both as a food, beverage, and hospitality person, as a cancer survivor, you almost have kind of like a what I used to call like a newswoman's approach. You know, you dig deep for things. You know, do you see that?
Well, I always wanted to be a journalist. Even when I was a little girl, writing was what I did. I had diaries and diaries and diaries. And my dream when I was in high school was to be Helen Gurley Brown and run a magazine. I wanted to run Cosmopolitan magazine. And I kind of got sideswiped because, Watergate happened and everybody wanted to be a journalist, and that's about when I was starting out. So I ended up in public relations, which if you can write and you communicate, it's a great industry to be in. And I was very, very good at what I did. I got to tell you, I still get calls saying you were the best. And I still am. It's just that after going through breast cancer treatment, I decided that no longer brought me joy. So how do you define success today? In my life, I've redefined success. It's got to be doing things that bring me joy, that I enjoy doing. And also I learned that the first half of my life was about becoming a success, and the second half is really about making an impact.
There you go. And obviously the second half of your life, of course, besides beating breast cancer, you got married to a great guy. Obviously there's I didn't pull it up on this program, but there's a great video.
Oh, it's great.
You can never find it at one of the last Beard Awards that you
Right.
did, and David's proposal. It is quite something. It's something definitely should be witnessed by all those prospective bridegrooms who want to pop the
Well,
question.
we should explain it. It was my last James Beard Awards. It was 2006, and I was retiring from the awards. We were doing a tribute to one of my favorite cities in the world, New Orleans, where I went to college, Tulane University, and have family. And I consider that the place that turned me on to good food. And it was toward the end of the awards with 2,000 people in the auditorium. And David came out in a white dinner jacket and 24 red roses and made this beautiful, eloquent speech, which is webcast now on YouTube, and proposed marriage. And I, for once, was speechless.
And to say the least. quite,
A
quite,
little
uh,
babbly too.
quite
It was an
a.
emotional night, and we ended up getting married in New Orleans in 2007. So before I was diagnosed, and we had a wedding in New Orleans. It was right after, a couple of years after Katrina, and the city was still rebuilding. So we were happy to bring the party there.
To digress a minute, I don't know if I told you this off air, but I went to a wedding about 4 years ago in New Orleans. It was held at the Napoleon House. Do you know where that is?
Oh, yeah, we did our rehearsal dinner party. It really wasn't a dinner, it was a
Yeah.
rehearsal party there. It was
Yeah.
so much fun.
This was up on the third floor, but you could look out, and all of a sudden people were
Yeah.
like, oh, and at one point during the ceremony, all of a sudden, like a band comes marching by, and of course, the windows are all open, and the officiant is trying to, do the vows and do the ceremony, and everybody kind of had to stop to wait till the band moved. But needless to say, what do they say, 50% of marriages? So I think you know where I'm going with that. But we had a great time nonetheless while
Well,
we were
we
there.
had a band going by when we were having our party too.
Yeah.
It was St. Patrick's Day, the day of our wedding. So there was like parade. There's always a parade in New Orleans. That's a city born for parades.
Absolutely. While on the subject of New Orleans, you talked about your college days. Tell me a little bit about your upbringing. Where did you hail from originally?
Well, Larry, I'm a Southern girl. I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. My great grandparents settled there in the 1800s. My mother still lives there. She is alive. As I said before, my father passed in 2009. And it was back when I grew up, Chattanooga wasn't such a great city. It was kind of a manufacturing place, and a lot of Bible thumpers on the corners of downtown, and it was a manufacturing city. But since then, the people that really have invested in the town, and now it's one of the most beautiful towns in the South. Considered gig city, the fastest internet, the best place to live, the healthiest place to live, the greenest place to live. They're really going for all those superlatives, and actually we're leaving to go there tomorrow to see my mother for the holidays.
There you
And I went to New Orleans because when my dad turned 40, we went to New Orleans, and my dad ate his age in oysters.
Wow.
Raw oysters. And it was my first time I'd ever had raw oysters, fresh crab, fresh shrimp, because there was none of that in Chattanooga. The only thing in Chattanooga was like catfish.
I was going to say, yeah, a lot of fish. Yeah.
And I fell in love with New Orleans, and my family, my mother had gone to Sophie Newcomb, now Tulane University, and my cousin, so it was just kind of natural for me to want to go there. And that's really where I blossomed and knew that I wanted to write and be in food, beverage, and hospitality or tourism, and I never looked back. And I stayed and I graduated, and then I moved to Washington for a bit to try to become a Watergate journalist, and then eventually settled back in Atlanta, where all good Southern girls go to find careers, either there or Dallas, and ended up in a PR firm.
And then when did you come to New York area?
I caught the New York bug in the mid 1980s because the agency, Conan Wolf, where I had been working, was acquired by a large agency in New York called Burson Marsteller, and they were setting up offices, and I just got the New York bug. I wanted to, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, and it's the center of the media. So I started interviewing. I got a couple of good offers, and I picked the one that paid the most money and had the most fun-sounding clients, duh. And I was there for a number of years, maybe 3.5, 4, and then something happened. I was working and I had just switched jobs. I'd gone to a really big agency, and my grandmother dropped dead very suddenly of a massive heart attack. And I got the call in December. Actually, it would have just happened back in 1988, and she died very suddenly, and I flew down to be with my family, and I stayed a few extra days to help. And when I got back, I received a written reprimand for taking unauthorized time off.
Oh, amazing.
And that's when I knew that I needed to go out on my own, that I never wanted to have to ask permission in my life to do anything.
There you go.
And that's when I started. It was started out as M. Young Associates. I kind of bided my time. Eventually, was let go from the agency because I wasn't billable, which is a term in agency world. And I set up my own company, hung a shingle out of my apartment, and the rest is history.
There you go. All right. Well, let's touch on a few topics.
Sure.
Again, Melanie is all over the place. Radio. Someday soon we're going to see her on TV. Of course, Facebook, a blog, you name it. Twitter. Mighty Melanie. Yes, I love that. I love that. That's great stuff. And again, the books, Fearless, Fabulous You, and her first book, Getting Things Off My Chest, A Survivor's Guide to Staying Fearless and Fabulous in the Face of Breast Cancer, which, by the way, received both the 2014 International Book Award and the 2015 USA Best Book Award for Cancer Health Topics. Something you mentioned earlier, you, I think, firmly believe that cancer, among all the many, whether it's genes or hereditary or all of the above, stress, you feel, is a major contributor in some people to cancer.
Well, stress doesn't cause cancer. Stress just makes you sick.
Okay.
And if you have something wrong with you, if you're unhealthy anyway, stress just is the icing on the cake. I mean, it all starts, Larry, with your diet. But it's not just what you eat. I always say it's not only what you put into your body, but it's how you manage your body. And that means, are you exercising or are you living a sedentary lifestyle? And also, what is eating at you, which is your stress, and are you managing that? Because you can have a healthy diet, but if you're not managing your stress, and you're not moving, and you're not centered in other areas, it doesn't matter how healthy you're eating, you can still get sick. So I call that portion controlling your lifestyle diet. And it's not easy. I certainly have to face it every day. But that's really important, whether you have been diagnosed with any illness, but more importantly, to prevent illness.
You talk about one of your recent postings that I saw, how you foresee that, again, in restaurants, especially culinary chefs, etc., that they're going to be getting more and more away from meat and more into vegetable menus.
Yes. And actually, I posted that this week because Alain Ducasse, who's a very famous Michelin 3-star chef, who I know in France, has taken meat off his menu at his eponymous restaurant at the Plaza Athénée in France. And that is a trend that I am seeing all around the country, whether it's Dan Barber doing almost a vegetable manifesto for his Blue Hill at Stone Barns, to meatless Mondays in restaurants, and now, thankfully, vegetarian menus. Many years ago, only people like the great late Charlie Trotter were doing that, and everybody kind of was like, what, an all vegetable menu? Why would I pay for vegetables? Finally, chefs and food service, they get it, and it's making a huge difference because it's really impacting the most important crisis we have, which is the obesity issue. We need to bring obesity numbers down, and that has to happen starting with influential people who help change the way people look at food, and that's the educators, that's the registered dietitians, it's the certified health coaches, it's the chefs, it's the cookbook authors, it's the people on the media. You got to just keep getting that message out and getting healthier options for people and getting healthier food to areas that they call food deserts, which are areas of the United States where there's no access to healthy food.
You mentioned too recently about, I said, I got to try this, adding turmeric to your diet. Expound on that.
Well, turmeric is a superfood. It has a lot of anti-cancer properties. I've been actually, and it's very popular in Eastern medicine. And if you look to Eastern medicine, you'll find a lot of ways food is used as medicine. I've been adding turmeric to my vegetables, and lately I've been heating almond milk, which I happen to love because I've been going more to almond milk and I don't do cow's milk. And I've been putting a little turmeric in that and having it warm in a mug. It's absolutely delicious.
So turmeric and almond milk.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm
Not a
writing.
lot of turmeric. I mean, because but
Yeah.
it's wonderful, and I put it on salads. I put it on cauliflower. We put that with a little curry. David likes that. He thinks turmeric doesn't have enough flavor. I love it, but we add a little curry and raisins and almonds, and it's very healthy. I mean, nuts are so good for you in moderation.
Any plans in the future, since we're on the subject of food, of doing a perhaps like a healthy cookbook? You know, perhaps drawing on your experiences, obviously, and then matching it with the wines and et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, Larry, that's such a fun question because I get asked that a lot, and I would love to write a food book, and one with healthy pairings of wine. The funny thing about that is I never really learned to cook until I was after cancer. I had a fear of the kitchen. I had to overcome that. So the book is really going to have to start about how I had to overcome, like, I call myself a born again cook because I really only ate out. So I'm very self taught. So I have thought about it. What I really want to write is a food memoir that kind of talks about how my first half of my life was very rich and filling in that world, and how it's still rich and filling but in a healthier way in
Sure.
the new world, and how I learned to cook along the way. And I think there are many recipes that could punctuate this evolution that could be really fun, and I think would resonate with a lot of people.
Well, you've told me off air that again it was basically okay. What restaurant is the restaurant du jour? I mean,
Right. I mean, that's all I did was eat out. I mean, I kept shoes in the oven, and all I had in my refrigerator was champagne and lipstick and perfume. And when I met David, or re-met David, because we've known each other for years, he really likes to cook, so we had to negotiate a lot. But when I was bought a house in the Hudson Valley with, it was a big house, there's a kitchen, and we're in the country. Suddenly, and then I go and, have the cancer diagnosis. Suddenly, I really wanted to learn about food in a new way, and that was the healthier way. And I really got into, and I've always loved reading a cookbook. I've always loved food, but doing it myself was a big change in my life. Huge.
Melanie Young joining us for the hour here on Studio 411. Her books, Getting Things Off My Chest, as well as Fearless, Fabulous You, radio shows, blogs, Twitter, you name it, Facebook. Melanie is everywhere and anywhere. It's amazing it took me this long to find her. It's amazing, absolutely amazing, but well worth the wait. While on the subject of food, you talked recently about feeding the hungry along with dietary
Yes.
education. You know as well as I do that a lot of it is tied into also what's the word I'm looking for? Folks that eat poorly. Sometimes it's a monetary issue, but as
It
many
is a
say,
monster issue.
that it's sometimes you're better off using what little money you have to invest in better choices, is what, instead of the fast food and what people do.
Yes.
You know.
Well, we need to, if I've done anything from my training as a certified health coach, I really have a desire to become more of a public advocate to get the message out. And, it is socioeconomic. That's one aspect of it. Some of it's cultural, because some different people and backgrounds, they have richer food. The South is known for, even though the South is one of the great agrarian parts of our country, and we're going to be talking about this with Virginia Willis on Wednesday on our radio show, The Connected Table. And it's an agricultural area. The food is very rich, and a lot of that is just ethnic and cultural. Virginia actually is a Southern chef, and she's going to be coming out. She wrote Lighten Up Y'all because she had a health problem because she grew up in the South and was obese and had to lighten up her food. It's education, but it's also particularly grocers and fast food companies and the food service companies that do have access to these more rural areas or suburban where there are food deserts and you don't have whole food so easy to provide affordable, accessible food for everybody. And affordable and accessible are the two key words. And then healthy and nutritious, and not packaged processed food. So it's got to be a responsibility that starts at the corporate level all the way down.
And you bring up the corporate level without mentioning names, but
Yeah.
I think the ones
Yes.
I'm going at is soup companies, amongst many others, where all of a sudden, people have been eating and drinking and digesting, things that, oh, it's great for you, and then, it's loaded with too much salt, it's loaded with too much sugar, oh,
Yeah.
it's sugar free and it's not. I mean, and this is with even having consumer reports and government intervention, and still, it's amazing that it's taken until these last few years for the kind of the lid to be blown off this. And I'm sure with people like yourself and many of your colleagues saying, hey folks, wake up and smell the coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of, coffee's on the good list these days.
Good, yeah. Well, that was too with that, for a while, don't eat eggs. Now eggs are
I
supposedly good.
know.
Don't drink coffee. I worked with a guy one time that drank 12 cups of coffee, and he looked like he was like semi-comatose. So I don't know what it was. It wasn't decaf, because decaf wasn't around. I don't
Well, that's a
know.
bit too much. But the dietary guidelines are revised every number of years, and yeah, there was a big to do because for years they said eggs had too much dietary cholesterol, and they realized that that was not as bad as you thought. Basically, food in the most natural source, prepared simply and enjoyed in moderation is key. You can eat too much of anything. I mean, you've heard people who turn orange because they eat too many carrots. You gotta, nuts are healthy. A handful of nuts, not like a box of nuts.
Right.
You gotta just eat and in balance. It's all about in balance. You can also drink too much water, for crying out loud. Do you know you can overhydrate? I actually have a friend who went to a wedding and the bride passed out because she drank too much water.
Wow. So
Yeah, it
everything,
affects your electrolytes.
not to sound like the old Karate Kid movie, but everything in balance, Daniel's son. But
Everything
it's
in
true.
balance, and I'm big on eating smaller meals, not huge, gigantic meals. We've started doing that in our household, and I think that really helps. And don't skip meals. If you skip meals, which I used to do a lot, and that was a big problem, that really screws up your metabolism. Your body goes into a fat storage mode, and that's one of the reasons you get bloated and blotchy. So small meals throughout the day. There's a reason they say 3 small meals and 2 small snacks. I mean, that's because it keeps your body and its metabolism in balance, and your digestive system. You want to keep things moving.
Melanie Young joining us for the hour here on Studio 411, certified health coach, author, radio host, and breast cancer survivor. MelanieYoung.com for more information. Let's talk about, again, switching to what you went through to a
Yes.
certain extent, and others go through it in a larger extent. The economic impact of breast cancer. You enlightened me in a posting or a conversation that we had that, people think, oh yeah, insurance will cover this, and insurance doesn't cover everything, and what if you don't have insurance, I mean, it can
Well,
really drag you
yeah.
down into a dark hole.
Well, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, which was, as we know, was passed in 2010, I think, more Americans can get health insurance. That's a big issue because why is that significant? Because prior to that, pre-existing conditions were not covered by insurance. And I had a very good friend named Julie who was diagnosed with breast cancer, stage 4, which is metastatic, advanced. She did not have insurance, and she could not get insurance because she had a pre-existing condition. And she sadly is no longer with us. When I was diagnosed, I remember sweating because I was switching insurance companies, and all I wanted was to make sure I didn't have that pre-existing condition happen. So that was probably one of the greatest things that happened with the passing of the Affordable Care Act, besides the fact that more affordable insurance is available to all Americans. But that said, insurance does not cover all the bills. There are high deductibles. There are a lot of out-of-pocket costs and attendant costs that you have no idea. And I know that I had to write a lot of very big checks that drained my savings just to get through treatment. I mean, there was one drug, it was $4,000, and we had to pray and hope and get clearance to make sure it was covered by insurance. So you have to ask, because if you don't ask these questions, which is what I talk about in getting things off my chest in my detailed insurance section, you could really get stuck, because you need to know, does your hospital participate in your insurance program? Do the drugs you're going to be taking, are they going to be covered? Or do you have to, do certain types of drugs versus designer drugs? You can have a wig covered if it's a cranial prosthesis, but you have to know to ask for that, because wigs can be expensive once you lose your hair. So cancer is illness. Disease is expensive. Getting sick is expensive. So how do you deal with that? You first start by not getting sick. If you can possibly do that, and that's taking better care of your self-health from the beginning. If, God forbid, you do and you get a diagnosis, the other thing is to make sure that you have good health insurance and you understand what your co-payments are, your deductibles, and how your insurance plans are going to work for your drugs, so that you're not caught off guard. Because there's nothing worse than going through cancer treatment and worrying about how you're going to pay the bills.
Well, I was going to say there's a stress factor right there. I mean,
Very.
That no matter what the illness is, as you said, things have gotten better to some degree. I guess, what did I hear the other day? An additional 17 million people of all ages and genders now have medical coverage. But again, not to be a kind of a gloomy Gus, but again, they have some type of coverage. But again, is it sufficient for their needs? That's a whole other story. But I guess it's still better than having 46, 47 million people without coverage at all.
Exactly. The other aspect, though, Larry, is that cancer, or any major, and I'm going to say any major illness, plays a lot with your head. It wreaks havoc on your body, but it also wreaks havoc on you emotionally and mentally. And you just may not be able to go back to the life you had. You may not be able to cope with it, either physically or emotionally, and you have to be prepared for that adjustment. And you also have to make sure the people around you are prepared for it, because they may be expecting you to go back and they don't realize that you can't.
Right.
And you can't explain it, and it's perfectly okay to feel that way, and many people do. It's like post-traumatic stress that our military service people feel. It's very similar. You when you're going through cancer treatment or a major heart overcoming, you're going through one of the toughest battles of your life for your life. So think about the level of post-traumatic stress when you get through it and you've been a hero to yourself, and suddenly it's like everything's back to normal, but you're not. And that is something that actually is going to be one of my next books. It's about the long-term impact of cancer.
I think we talked privately a few months back about what I've come to learn, not necessarily personally, but just from some entertainers out there that have touched upon it, where they've had, let's say, heart issues and perhaps even cancer issues. And again, everybody says, oh yeah, they're recovered, they're on the road to recovery, they did this, they did that, okay, he or she's 100%. But again, it's that post-traumatic something, whatever you might call it, that again, it plays havoc. A lot of times people have things going on in their heads. They either a fear of dying, or,
Right.
I knew someone that, after they had an incident, all of a sudden it was like always in the back of their mind all the time. Oh, well, it's going to happen one of these days. Yeah, it's going to happen probably when you least expect it. But you can't just curl up into a ball. But again, it's easier said than done.
Well, and there's triggers. There's certain things that may trigger something, and it can happen. It can happen out of the blue when you leave, and it doesn't happen to everybody. But I will tell you, Larry, it happens to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I read a crazy statistic that 40% of women who've gone through chemotherapy were unemployed within 4 years after their treatment, 4 to 5 years after their treatment, and a lot of it was just they just didn't want to go back to the pace they were at.
Right.
That's an amazing statistic.
Yeah, I'll say.
It really is. And then also, sadly, and I mean this really sadly, some employers are not sensitive to that, and they let the people go. They can't necessarily let somebody go when they're ill, but they can let them go afterwards because they may say you're not working to capacity.
Right, right.
And that's unfortunately something that I've seen happen over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, as you
Yeah.
say and said to me both here and privately, fortunately you were in a position where you had your own business, and then you obviously made some changes, both
Yes.
business-wise, both location, residency-wise. You were
Yeah.
able to do that, but again, also with some struggle because, as you said,
Yeah.
the old account is getting drained. Writing those checks or swiping those credit cards. But again, you fortunately, and I know you feel this way, were in maybe a better position than most to come out on the other side and then channel your expertise and your energies once you got your strength back to do the work you're doing now. And of course, as you said before, you definitely have the writing skills, and you've got the curiosity skills, which is kind of something I like to think I have, is we're always curious about learning about new things. And in this case, you channel it into this wide array of things related to cancer,
Right.
which really helps other people.
Well, I never thought ever. If you talked to me 8 years ago, I never would even think that I'd be talking about any of this.
Sure.
But I think everybody has to realize in life that sometimes things happen and doors close, and you have to open new ones.
Yeah. New breast cancer screenings in
Yes.
2015 from the American Cancer Society. On the mark, or do you buy into tell the audience
So
what
interesting.
some
Well,
of their new screenings are?
yeah, the new screenings are from the American Cancer Society that uh, you don't have to have that you don't have to get screened at 40 anymore. You can wait till 50, and then from 55 on, every 2 years for mammograms. And no more clinical breast exams, which is when you go to your OBGYN and they really, feel through your breast area and your tissue and your wall. Um, to me, it means the onus is more on you as the individual to be more vigilant about asking to be screened and also giving yourself self-examinations, which is how I found my own tumor in one of my 3 tumors in my breast. The reason for this and there's many, because you're supposed to be getting baseline at 40, often have false positives. The reason for that is that many young women have dense breasts, which are more fatty tissue, and dense breasts can disguise tumors or create false positives. However, statistically, more women's lives have been saved by mammograms that have found tumors than false positives. But for whatever reason, because some false positives have led to unnecessary surgeries, they haven't made these adjustments. I interviewed Dr. Susan Love, who wrote one of the definitive breast cancer books, and was also a survivor of lymphoma. And she actually supports the American Cancer Society guidelines. I personally feel, as a survivor of breast cancer, I'd like to see women start and continue being screened annually at age 40 and up. And I don't think there's anything wrong with doing clinical breast exams. It's 5 minutes of a doctor's time. I think it's important not only to do it as part of your checkup, but also remind you to do it yourself. You're less likely to go get exams if you're not doing them annually. You'll let them slip, you'll forget. And I think about the woman out there who maybe in the 2 years that she doesn't get a mammogram and something happens. Do you know, well, you don't, when I had my mammogram, I always got it on Halloween, because you always schedule like a holiday that you can remember. So I used to get my mammograms on Halloween. My Halloween mammogram in 2008 was fine. Because I did breast self-exams, I found my tumor 9 months later.
Right.
I had 3 tumors. How did that happen? I don't know. Was there no was my mammogram not 100%? Maybe, because they're not perfect, but they still remain the best screening method out there. They're improving. There's tomosynthesis, which is a better type of mammogram. 3D mammogram is what they're calling it. So the technology is improving.
And in your case, 9 months after the last one, that would have meant 15 months of whatever escalation, possibly aggressive escalation before the
Yeah.
next exam. And what if then, oh, you know what, we're going to the Caribbean, I'll put it off another couple of months. You know how people are. Life
Well,
comes in.
women are like that. People, but particularly women. Women are the first to say, "Oh no, I got to take my kids to the pediatrician.
Yeah.
Oh no, I don't have time. Oh no." So the great thing about getting an annual screening is we all tend to do it on a certain date. I have a friend who does it on New Year's Eve. I do it on Halloween. You find that if somebody does it on their birthday, you get it and you just put it into your calendar. It's like getting your teeth cleaned. Would you get your teeth cleaned more frequently? Really, if it was every 2 years, now you probably let it slip. But if you know you got to get your teeth cleaned every 6 months, you know you're going to do it.
Yeah. The change by the American Cancer Society, do you attribute that to perhaps pressure from insurance companies to implement that so that they have to fork over less money?
Personally, I totally do.
Yeah.
Because I've also seen other kinds of screenings that seem to be getting changed in the process, and the cost of health care is going up. And I have to wonder if all this is happening since the passage of the Affordable Care Act. I don't know. Everybody's saying it's because there's, on the flip side, there's more women who are undergoing unnecessary breast surgery. DCIS is kind of like that, maybe cancer. And there are women who are saying, take them off. I don't want to have cancer, and that's what they call the Angelina Jolie effect. So, yeah, there are, and of course, that's an insurance issue.
Sure.
So I trace everything back to insurance companies personally.
There was one, and I believe there were several others, but I want to say 10 or 15 years ago, 3 sisters somewhere in middle America that had a history of it, mothers, sisters, rather aunts, grandmothers. They went and they were all over the news because at early 30s they had breasts removed. So all 3 sisters, and again, because it was a sure bet that they were susceptible to getting it because every female elder in the family had gotten it and in most cases had died young from it. So obviously,
I have a good friend who also had that. I mean, it's a genetic, it's called, there are a couple of genetic mutations. The most common one is the BRCA, BRCA1 or 2. We all have those genes, but in some cases they have a mutation, which means they're a little off. I was diagnosed with BRCA2. Now, what's interesting about that is I had no family history of breast cancer.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. So
no, what I had was when I was diagnosed, and they asked me my family history, which it's very important to know your family history of all diseases. So when I said to the doctors that I was interviewing that my dad had prostate cancer and skin cancer, and they asked me what my heritage was, and it was is Ashkenazi Jewish. They said, we really think you may want to consider genetic testing because women who are Ashkenazi Jewish, and there are other backgrounds as well, do have a propensity to carry the genetic mutation. In my case, I did test positive.
There you go. Melanie Young joining us on this episode of Studio 411. Melanie, certified health coach, author, radio host, breast cancer survivor. And I just had a momentary loss of thought here. I know I was going to ask you something I saw last night on the news. Who says I don't watch the evening news? Some great progress made with pregnant mothers-to-be who were diagnosed with cancer, and rather than, I guess, wait until they deliver the baby full term, they are administering chemotherapy and in some cases radiation, and the initial results not only are helping the pregnant moms, but they claim are not hurting the fetuses.
Yes, I heard that as well, and I actually interviewed a fertility expert recently, Dr. Jane Frederick, on how women who've been diagnosed with cancer how can they deal with fertility issues, because there's a lot of issues to address. And you can, if you are pregnant when you're diagnosed, you can safely undergo chemotherapy. Obviously, so that's a reassuring aspect to a young woman who is diagnosed. The other aspect is deciding if you want to freeze your eggs before you start treatment, and what kind of fertility methods you can do to preserve your eggs before you start treatment.
You and I a few weeks back talked about former President Jimmy Carter, who,
Yes.
of course, was diagnosed with a form of brain cancer. And then, of course, when you hear that right away, at least I do, you think, oh, this is, short of, like pancreatic cancer and a few others, right away, that's not good. But you were telling me apparently some of these new drugs out on the market are really making a difference. And not long ago, he came out that apparently
Yes.
he is cancer free, and we certainly hope that, as you said
Yeah.
earlier, something isn't missed. But so far, so good.
Well, the type of drugs, it's called immunotherapy, and it is the next frontier in treating cancers. President Carter had melanoma that metastasized to his brain. Metastasis is the spreading of cancer beyond the origination point. So you can have breast cancer, it can metastasize. It commonly does to your bones or your brain. And that's what happened with President Carter. Immunotherapy is targeted therapy to treat certain types of cancers. And when they do these tests, they're first done with stage 4 metastatic cancer. So what's reassuring is that it works with metastatic for early stage cancer, which is how many drugs, whether it's tamoxifen or I'm on Arimidex, they all start as clinical trials in metastatic. And once they get through that phase, then they start working their way into helping early stage diagnosis.
I have to ask, as someone that is clearly well versed in many drugs out there, certainly not all of them. You're not an MD, and I'm sure an MD wouldn't be as well versed in all of these things. But you open up a magazine or you see a 2-minute commercial that seems like it never ends. This great new drug, and then all of a sudden it has about 150 side effects. That it's like you get almost like petrified to say, I'm not taking that drug. I mean, I saw one the other day in a magazine. There was the ad, which was 2 pages, and then the small print that went on for another 6 pages.
Well, all drugs are like that because they got to cover their liability
Yes, yeah,
assets.
liability.
And all drugs are gonna, one, you always should ask about the drug that is being prescribed. Is it necessary? Now, I'm going to say that because recently I had a bout of the flu and I was coughing and breathing, and suddenly all the prescriptions started coming in. You need an inhaler, you need I didn't need most of it. It's a big waste of money.
Yeah.
So a lot of doctors love to prescribe drugs. You got to really ask if it's absolutely necessary. And what does this drug do? And why are you being prescribed? And is there a generic version of it, which is less expensive? Because the designer ones are the ones that are advertising in the magazine, and they're going to be more expensive, even if they're covered by insurance and you don't know what your copay is. Next is what are the side effects? And that is going to be different for every individual. So that long list is because it could be anything with anybody. And, you have to ask. You also have to ask if this drug has interactions with any food. For example, grapefruit juice does not interact well with many drugs. One of the drugs I had, they told me not to have pomegranates. Go figure. So you have to ask, will this drug be impacted by any food I eat? And you have to take the drug as prescribed also, which a lot of people don't do. So drugs you got to own your drugs and take them with mindfulness and full responsibility, but also ask, do I really need this drug?
Absolutely, and good thing I don't like grapefruit.
Yeah, I mean, I had all these drugs that they gave me when I had the flu, and looking back, you're sick, and you take them all because you just want to get well. And then now that I have clarity, there were 2 of them that were a total waste. Actually, 3 out of 4 drugs. 3 of them were a waste of time and money,
I hear you.
and a total waste of money.
Our last topic in the hour with Melanie Young, learning to say no. That's something that Melanie has learned later in life about instead of trying to do it all, sometimes you just say, you know, I'm done.
You know, I still am learning that one, Larry. And I had a moment today. As I mentioned, we had a little technical issue with my radio show, and I looked at my husband. I said, you know what? I'm done for the year. I may just have a recorded show next week rather than beating my head up trying to find a guest. You know, for right around New Year's, Christmas. Sometimes you're just gonna say enough.
And then she
And
looked at her
give
watch and said,
yourself
darn, I have to do an
permission to
interview with
say
that
no.
Larry Dasilva.
Yeah.
So my day hasn't ended yet. I got to talk to this guy. So no, I hear you.
Well, no, this is a delight, but it was like, you know, I was like, I don't want to go through this next week, and it's perfectly okay. You know, it's not like somebody's. You have to realize most of the stuff you do in life, not everybody's holding you up to a standard. You're holding yourself up to your own standard. Nobody's got to, you know, nobody's forcing you to do half the stuff you do. A lot of it is self, you know, in my case, self-indulgent. So sometimes you have to step back and go, is this absolutely necessary to do today? What's going to happen if I just say no?
There you go.
Right?
Okay. I've got to learn that as well. All righty, as we wrap up this hour of Studio 411, the great Melanie Young, and we're going to try to get her here in the studio, even if we have to get a horse and buggy to bring her from New York. But
car service.
car service. There you go. Let's see.
As
Oh my
knows,
goodness.
I don't drive at night, and lately I'm not driving. Period.
Where do I begin? Getting things off my chest: A Survivor's Guide to Staying Fearless and Fabulous in the Face of Breast Cancer. Her second book, Fearless, Fabulous You: Lessons on Living Life on Your Own Terms. Her radio shows. Follow Melanie on Twitter at Mighty Melanie. MelanieYoung.com, her blog, my goodness, everywhere and anywhere. And right here with us today, I thank you so much for making time. Have a great time visiting Mom, and we look forward to having you back on the show because there's always stuff to talk about.
Larry, it would be a pleasure, and I agree. I want to go out to Nutmeg and be there in person, so we'll have to figure out a way to make that happen.
Absolutely. Hang tight a second. We thank you for joining us here on this episode of Studio 411, and we look forward to being back with you soon. Have a great week. Take care.